PlanetSide 2 has been around for over 10 years, and it's very easy to find people who've been playing for all 10 of those years. It's understandable that they would know the ins and the outs of the game, but this leads to one major problem. The skill floor to get even a decent number of kills is too high, especially when you play as infantry. There are a few videos I've seen on the subject, but most of them are either outdated or really obscure and hard to find, so I thought, why not one more? Before I start explaining things, you should know a few things first. I'm not the best when it comes to infantry gameplay. I know most of the basics and some of the advanced techniques, but I'm bad at actually using them. Essentially, I have a skill issue. Also, since I've been playing a more rounded playstyle, meaning I like to play everything and don't specialize as an air, tank, or infantry main, I might have some outdated info. And if it's not outdated now, it might be in the future. Part 1. Guns. When it comes to weapons you can choose, you really shouldn't worry about it that much, but know that each of your faction-specific weapons generally fit into certain categories. The NC weapons hit harder and each bullet deals more damage. The TR weapons shoot faster. This comes in faster rechamber time, higher fire rate, or even faster reload speed. The VS has bullets that drop less, and sometimes with better accuracy when firing from the hip. The NSO has guns with tighter bullet spread, and instead of their damage falling off at 10 meters like every other weapon, it starts falling off at 15 meters. This also means they sometimes have better range damage models than the other factions. There's also the NS weapons, not to be confused with NSO. The NS, or nanite systems, are common pool weapons. Any faction can use them. These weapons usually fit into the middle of all the other ones, giving some of the benefits of the other factions while removing some of the benefits from your faction. This might mean a higher fire rate with a tighter bullet spread for an NC player, but each individual bullet deals less damage overall than an NC weapon might. The general tactic for choosing a weapon when you're first starting out is to not buy one. While you might be getting killed by the other weapons, they are, for the most part, not an upgrade to your gun. It's just that the enemy player is using advantages that they have, while you might not actually know your advantages. Instead, you should spend your hard-earned certs on your abilities. I would like to mention that each class and vehicle has a button on the loadout screen that is bright orange and says whatever you're looking at, followed by certs. Always check that button. It shows a list of the upgrades that you can get for your class or vehicle, lets you upgrade something without accidentally equipping the wrong thing to your loadout, and, most importantly, it also lets you access the passive systems. When it comes to infantry, the passive systems are important for the infiltrator, medic, and engineer. For the infiltrator, it lets you hack terminals and turrets faster. For the medic, it lets you heal nearby allies while you're in a vehicle, which also applies to max units. And for the engineer, it lets you repair your aircraft at the same rate as the first level of the auto repair ability. Note that this does not stack with the auto repair ability for your aircraft. Aside from those, you just need to upgrade whatever ability you most use. If you find a certain heavy assault shield complements your playstyle, upgrade that before you worry about a shiny new gun. Part 2. Movement, placement, and aiming. When it comes to shooting at targets in a close-range duel, it's important to keep moving in order to avoid more shots. A good way to practice this is to step away from a terminal and practice strafing left until your reticle is on the border of the terminal, then strafing right until you're on the other border. This is a good amount of space for your strafe. Older videos will also tell you to quickly tap your crouch button, which is by default Alt, because you see a small change in angle when they see a large one. This has actually been changed. Basically, you need to hold the button for 2 or 3 times as long, still long enough for you to notice a small difference, but not so long you actually crouch. The devs basically just messed with the timing there. The reason why you want to do this goes into where you actually want to aim while you're shooting at your enemy. Most guns in PlanetSide, even other first-person shooters, have a 2 times multiplier when hitting the head. Some have more, and a select few have less. When you hit the body, you only have a 1 times multiplier, and hitting the legs has a 0.9 times multiplier, meaning you'll deal less damage. Not that much in the short term, but a lot when you're both shooting for a few seconds. This means that you want to aim at your target's head. You even want to make sure you're aiming at head height before the fight actually starts. A good way to practice this is to go into a building. On the walls there should be this brownish colored bar with 2 black bars, one above and one below. Head height is approximately the same height as the higher of the 2 black bars, meaning if you aim at that as you run around the building, you'll always end up at the enemy's head level when you run into each other. This gives you an advantage if they're aiming down at all, so make sure you practice both your passive aiming and your active movement. Probably the most important thing to note for when you're standing still is that you need to place yourself correctly. This means either positioning yourself in an area where the enemy won't likely check, or in an area where the environment benefits you. One thing to know about where people will not likely check is above themselves. People tend to get tunnel vision when they're focusing too much and forget to look up before it's too late. This isn't to say they won't check anyway, but it's still a good tactic. Also, make sure you don't just climb a box opposite the door or they'll easily notice you. Another part about positioning is that when you're aiming down your sight, your character model actually slightly moves. It's very hard to see, but it also changes your damage model to lean slightly to your right. So it's better to line yourself up so that you're behind something that is also to your right. That way your enemy has a smaller area to shoot, especially on the head, than you do. Part 3. Fieldcraft. Now that you know the basics of infantry gameplay, you should know some of the more advanced info. Like I said earlier, I'm not the best when it comes to playing as infantry, and I might not know everything there is to know about the more advanced topics. This is part of why I don't want to cover any specific loadouts to use. I also don't want to go over them because you probably need to get used to earning certs before I make you worry about how many you need to spend, among other things. But one thing I'm confident about is my infantry-based fieldcraft. But what is fieldcraft? Put simply, it's knowing how to get where you're going in the most effective manner. When it comes to vehicle gameplay, this means getting to bases by taking back roads, canyons, or any other shortcut you can. But for infantry, it basically means getting a heavy assault somewhere where you would only think a light assault could get to. One thing about the walls and even most of the steep terrain that you should know about is that a lot of it is very climbable, but you wouldn't guess it. Take this wall for example. As a heavy assault, I can simply jump over it, and in case you're thinking that it's because the wall's at an angle, here's me jumping over it in the other direction. But how do you do this? It's actually very simple. All you do is you run at it, and then when you hit it, continue trying to run at it as you hit your spacebar as quickly as possible. If you either don't press it fast enough or you stop jumping, you fall back to the ground. This doesn't work on every wall though, and even I don't know all the ones it does work on. This is because even though the walls look the same, they're sometimes actually different codes with the same visual texture. But do you know what always has the same code all the time? Buildings. Not all building walls can be climbed this way, but a lot of them can. Take this building here, which I've heard people call a triple stack, but I know there are other names for it, I just don't know those names myself. This building is a classic choice for a point room. Usually the point is on the second floor in one of these two rooms. When you need to push into the room, there's these two natural choke points keeping you from getting onto the floor, and usually there's enough people watching the roof to kill anyone who jumps down on it. But no one usually watches this balcony. Someone might put a mine or two to kill that one or two light assaults that keep trying to come in, but no one expects to be killed by the heavy assault, or even max, that comes into the balcony. To climb it, all you need to do is run over to this corner. Make sure you're looking directly at this beam. Then start jumping. This one is pretty narrow, so it can be hard to get up. Then you can directly shoot into the room while being under the cover of the balcony railing, or even jump over the balcony and run into the room to surprise everyone in there. Another area on the same building can get you from the second floor to the roof. For this one, you need to walk along this small path on the edge of the building. You can get here by either using the balcony or a window, and yes, these walkways are on other buildings, so use them if someone sees you run into one corner so you can flank them. But after running along it, you should get to this corner of the building. For this climb, it's easiest to try running along the wall as you climb. If you can successfully do this, you can get from the ground floor to the roof as any class, and not even enter the building. Now imagine if you did one of those two entrance tactics with a squad or platoon. There are other buildings that you can do this with, but the only other one I remember is this building style. If you run up to this wall, you can climb it. This lets you place a beacon in this naturally defended location. Even better if you put a shield over it, but this also works on some crates and other obstacles, so go around and try out different paths to get to the point room. Who knows, maybe you'll surprise a full squad and get a few kills on them. Part 4. Practice. This is the most important part, but there's no real way to explain it in depth. Just go out there and practice. The more you try, the better you'll do. Again, if you're new to the game, you're fighting people who have been playing for up to 10 years or more, so don't get frustrated when you die to them. In fact, try typing /tell followed by their name, and ask if they can give any tips. For the most part, despite what you might see in Yell Chat, most of the players are people who have been through this period of just being bad, and they can get excited to teach others how to play. And if you're in an outfit Discord, ask them about any tips and tricks you can learn. This also helps you learn from a group that has a lot more experience when put together than one person. As long as you practice and ask for constructive criticism and help along the way, you'll eventually become significantly better. Just don't expect it to happen overnight. Now if you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like. If there's anything you learned or even anything you feel others should know, including me, leave a comment. And if you want more content explaining some of the playstyles of PlanetSide 2, make sure you subscribe.
I'm an engineer. This will be good as new.